pushing yourself into the work of certain things, that's how you develop your best self. I really do believe no matter how bad situations are, they're meant to propel you, only if you let them though. And I think, you know, the more we recognize who we are, we'll take the experience and ones like those and we'll throw them away and we'll say, this is just something to add to my toolbox of greatness.
On this week's show, we continue with our Millennial series and welcome writer, speaker, and mentor, Ebony Tutora, an empowerment coach and the founder of Queens Recognize Queens, whose motto is, here to be the change. In our real conversation, Eb discusses everything from the need to spend time alone, owning up to our problems, how President Trump is a blessing, biases in society because of skin tone, trusting yourself, as well as Sir Isaac Newton's law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Every week we do this, I'm more impressed with the depth of knowledge from this generation, and I feel I'm becoming a better person because of these discussions. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends on Facebook and Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe to our Instagram and YouTube channels. I'd like to thank our partners and sponsors, especially Happy Socks and Alatura Naturals. And now, without further ado, I bring to you Ebony Tutora.
This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks, and today we continue with our Millennial series, and we have Ebony Tutora, life and business coach at the company you founded, Queens Recognize Queens. Your motto is here to be the change. Eb, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. What a great intro. Thank you.
So I'm just very curious. I've been doing some research about your company that you founded, and I would love to know about the name, Queens Recognize Queens. What does that mean? Where did that come from?
So I grew up with brothers, and I believe that I've acquired some tendencies of how boys are, which is not really catty. You guys are really to the point, supportive of one another. I notice, like boys fight and then they're friends like tomorrow, maybe within 5 minutes, Right. Girls aren't like that. And when I moved back to Binghamton, probably about 9 years ago, I felt a lacking in like female support, and I moved from New York, and I felt like I found so many women who just like surrounded me and supported me, and just wanted to see me do well, and you could have intellectual conversations. So it came from feeling as though I had gotten to a point of life where I could recognize that I was divine, that I was special, that I was meant to do a lot more. And I noticed an exchange between other women where I felt if I walk past you and I don't know you, but you acknowledge me, people would always say, do you know her? I'm like, no, she's a queen and she must recognize the queen in me. So that's our foundation of just what we know without knowing. And I always say real, when I do videos, I say real, recognize real, because, it's all kind of that same motto of, just identifying with people who identify with you and recognizing I was made in the image of God, you were made in the image of God, and although we might not know each other, we can acknowledge, respect, and honor each other.
I love that.
What. Yeah.
And I love the word divine.
Thank you.
And tell us more about that. What do you mean when you say that you're divine?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I think I figured out a good portion of it as far as, I've researched a lot of different religions, grew up in the Christian faith. However, I had a lot of questions that, just things that didn't sit well with me. I wanted to explore, and in exploring different religions, there's always this knowledge of we are made in the image of God. And what's what I'm looking for? You can look at that however you want. But I feel like when you really look at it just for what it is, I am made in the image of God. Even if you say it a couple times, it's like, whoa, it like builds up momentum. Like, this is really crazy. Like, I have potential and I can do anything I want. And this is all just a game and a test. And it's, what part do I want to play in it? And saying that I'm divine acknowledges that I'm aware of that. I am made in the image of God. Nothing less, nothing more. That's kind of how I see it.
Very nice. You wrote a Facebook post today, and I'd like to read it.
Okay.
And then I'd like you to explain it.
Okay.
So you say, believe that good exists, first within you, second within the world. What you seek is seeking you, but you resist it. My life goal is to be a master of self. That's where our power is. And then you say, P.S. The pineal gland is known to be a literal stargate. Access it. Very, very insightful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Actually, sometimes those words kind of don't even come from me. I meditate too. And just in meditating, I kind of, I see where people struggle, and I see that a lot of times in fixing the world, because I was kind of one of those people at one point where you want to fix things, but you're not right. And I know that when you can fix yourself and you can look at things from that I perspective, I also posted something the other day saying, stop saying them and putting everything out there. You have to say I, and the more you say I, the more reflective and aware you are. And I know that we resist,
Start to take responsibility?
Yeah.
Is that
right?
Okay.
Just taking responsibility of our lives, of, people complain about everything. The biggest thing is our president, and I just think it's all meant to be, and instead of embracing the change, we create so much resistance. And just in trying situations, when you go through a situation, a lot of times we present it with resistance. Why is this happening to me? I don't have the ability to change my circumstances because of A, B, C, or D. And when we shift that viewpoint and know that we are part of the source and we can tap into that whenever we want, and we're given literally everything we need in the pineal gland. That was just this is just one piece of information that if you can just go Google it and just keep researching it, because you'll realize you've been given a lot more than you think you've been given. And the more that you can just keep stepping into yourself and keep stepping into the love and the kindness and the peace and the joy and the reason for why you're here, I feel like you tap into that stargate, that pineal gland of being on the same wavelength as the universe and saying, you know what, God, you can lead me and I will follow. So that's kind of where
that's wonderful. How did you learn about that?
I've known about that for some time, and my journey's kind of funny because, I think when you first start learning about certain things, it was more along the lines of like conspiracy theory, like fluoride damages the pineal gland, all these different things. Not that they're not true, but I feel like mentally they can lead you down a rabbit hole of like being worried and feeling like you don't have control, opposed to saying, wow, like that is kind of strange. It is kind of strange that when you look at our eyes and our irises, it does resemble a galaxy. There's all these different, they're not mysterious, but they're right in front of our face. It's like pieces of the puzzle. And I've always been interested in just the human and the human mind and how we think and how we act and how we are and what is our potential and why do we get placed in certain circumstances. So the journey of that has been probably for the past, maybe 10 years,
okay.
That I've been aware of that, like the pineal gland and your mind and the power of it. And It has 100,000 billion connections, which sounds like, is that even a number? Like, how do you get there? And exploring that. And every time I get into a space of like, this is overwhelming, because we all do, it doesn't matter, I catch myself more. It's like, oh, it's like a bubble. You're like, oh no, I'm just gonna smush you down, because this is not real. And the more that I can project to the world opposed to getting projected upon, I think that's kind of what we have to learn to do.
Yeah. So as you know, your interview is part of our Millennial series.
Yeah.
And I'm just really impressed, for someone your age, to be able to be so insightful. And then you said you started on this path 10 years ago, so you were very young.
Yeah.
Was there someone in your life? Was there a number of circumstances that led you on this path? Do you recall when it began?
I do. You know what? I think about my childhood, and I was very wildflowerish. And when I say that, I mean like, I really remember as a kid loving to be by myself. I think it did come from feeling lonely, but embracing it opposed to feeling unloved. And like sitting in my backyard and like looking up at the sky and just staring and just thinking about it. It's just so strange that I was like that. I don't know what was placed on my heart to be that kind of kid. It's just, my grandmother, she is my rock. She's very faith-driven. She's taught me quite a bit, and in my journey, I know that I've taught her quite a bit because I took her lessons and embraced them. And then, if it's okay, can I get into my...
Please.
So when I was 18, at that age, I had already been dating a guy who was 10 years my age. And I knew it wasn't good. He was very abusive, both physically and mentally. And I moved to Brooklyn with him after high school. So I graduated Binghamton High School in 2006. Dated him my whole high school career, would miss school because I had a black eye or, whelps on my neck. Different crazy things. I had really great grades, made it through. If you weren't close to me, you didn't know. You wouldn't know. So I did get away from him safely because I knew this stint around, I'm like, okay, this is gonna get worse. Now I'm living with him in his city. He would time me on my way home from work. He knew how long it took for me to get home. It was very controlling. And I met a guy, and he just started talking to me about like apartments. I worked in the Brooklyn Atlantic Terminal, and I just was like, I don't know you, but I really have to get out of the situation that I'm in. I would love if you could help me get an apartment. So as I'm going back home, first of all, I was late. My phone rings, this guy's calling me to tell me he has an apartment for me. I couldn't answer that phone call. So walking into that situation, I was really afraid for my life because I'm like, if I tell him it's another guy and I'm trying to get an apartment because I know you're going to kill me, like this is going to be really bad. So I lied and I said it was my grandmother. He knew it wasn't. So I actually called her and I was on the phone with her speaking in code for like an hour because I was like deathly afraid. I'm like, when I hang up this phone, I don't know what's going to happen. So he walks up to me when I do hang up and he goes, you need to get out. So I was very tactical, and I'm like, okay, you have to pretend like you have nowhere to go. You have, because if you...
So he was kicking you out of the
Right, he was kicking me out because in his mind it was just controlling. I was being secretive. I took too long to get home. He wanted to put me in a situation that was just, in his mind, a bad situation. But I had a really close friend who had family out there, so I kind of just played it off like I had nowhere to go, and I kind of was like crying, where should I go? And in my mind, I knew I had somewhere to go, but I had to do that. So in my mind, just being in line with what we know, because I think we know things and we avoid them. I knew in my heart, going back to him this last time, because we had broken up, would be really bad. So I lived with her for a little bit, and I ended up getting a call. He calls me and he goes, I have your stuff. We had a car that we had rented, and I was just parking everywhere. I ended up getting towed. And I had just memorabilia things and things that meant a lot to me. So he said, I have your stuff. You should come get it. Everything in me was like, don't go. Don't go, don't go, don't go. So I went, and the minute I get in the car, He just whacked me. I had a black eye on this side because he was driving on this side, trying to figure out where was I staying? Did I meet another guy? So he ended up holding me hostage for over 24 hours.
Gosh.
To which he took me back to his house. And as we were walking into his apartment, there were cops. And, you know, I'm trying to do like the telepathy, like, please.
Make eye contact.
And they were looking at me. You can tell they're like looking at me, but I think if I would have made a move like say help or start going a little crazy as to let them know I'm in trouble right now, I think they would have helped, because we kind of like caught eyes for a minute and they're like looking at me like, do you need us? Like, what's going on, you know? And he says to me, you know, if you make one wrong move, like everybody's gonna die. So, you know, I don't want to injure the rest of the world because I made a poor choice of interacting with this man. So I go up into his apartment with him. He's begging and pleading me, please stay with me. I'll do anything for you. I'll buy you this, I'll do that. But I wasn't that person anymore, you know, and that was
You had already made the decision.
Yeah, I'd already made the decision. God allowed me to get away from you safely. So I know in my heart that being with you is just not a good move for me. It's not a good move for me. And plus he was into illegal activity. You know, it just wasn't a life that I wanted to live. I didn't want to live that life at all. And in my mind, I kind of started wishing everyone goodbye because I knew that I probably was going to die. He did have a gun. And just for hours, he just was trying to get me to be with him.
At this point, you're at the apartment.
At the apartment.
Okay, so are you trying to escape? Are you trying to?
No, I was actually trying to be tactical.
Okay.
Because I was praying a lot in my mind. Like I don't think I've ever prayed that hard. You know, like, please, God, I know you hear me. I know you see what's happening. Please just let me out of this situation. And I promise you, I will use this story to just fuel who I am and be the best I can be. He ended up raping me, which was my, you know, I don't even ask for sympathy for that because that saved my life. I wasn't going to sleep. I was wired. I'm like, if I have to be up for the next, I mean, I don't know what my body would have given into, but I wasn't going to go to sleep by any means necessary. So he did that. I go in the shower. I'm like bawling for at least 5 minutes. And I'm just like, I cannot believe this is happening to me. Like, this is crazy. I leave out the room. And I leave out the bathroom and I look into the room and he's dead asleep. And all I heard was run. I didn't even put my shoes on. I picked them up. I was like fumbling for like whatever I had. I grabbed his car keys because I'm thinking, I need to go get my stuff and just drive somewhere as far away from him, as I can, because like he's nuts. He's really crazy. So I run down the stairs. I didn't want to take the elevator. I didn't know if he heard the door slam. I was super frantic. I ended up running up to this was St. Mark's and Nostrand in it's not Canarsie, that's Crown Heights. So I run into the grocery store and I'm kind of peeking out to see if he's following me. And I realized he wasn't, and I ended up grabbing a cab to Atlantic Terminal, because I couldn't find the car. And I actually did see it while I was in the cab, but something was like, you know what, don't do that, just find your way. And as I'm in Atlantic Terminal, I go into the Starbucks and I had these really big Chanel glasses that came down like this, and I was bawling. Like I was just so shaken up. You know, it was just like, this really just happened to me. And this lady walks up to me, she goes, whoever made you cry doesn't deserve you. And although it wasn't like 100% relevant, it was almost like a touch of God, like, hey, just like whoever did that to you, like, don't even cry, you'll be okay. She didn't know what I'd gone through. She couldn't see my eyes. She couldn't see I had a huge black eye. And I end up speaking with the guy who ended up getting me the apartment, and he goes, you need to call the police. I don't even think that was in my mind. Like, I think I was just gonna go about life like a normal person. Like, it's.
And why? Why?
Because I grew up in traumatic situations with my mom, seeing my mom in domestic violence. And I think when we grow up a certain way, one of the things that I'd been really great at was coping and moving on, because for a lot of generations, many of our parents have done that, our grandparents have done it, our grandparents' parents have done it, where you don't talk about things, you just move on,
right? So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna talk about it much. You know, whoever knows me, you know, I'll tell them if I feel like it, and I'll just move on. Like I don't know why I didn't think I should go call the police. This is really bad. Right. You know, and he had violated me so many other times. I don't think it wasn't, I don't know. It wasn't, it just didn't cross my mind. So I'm like, okay, I probably should do that. And I walk up to a paddy wagon of police officers. There's maybe 2 that aren't in the paddy wagon. So if you know New York, there's you know, 15 officers in one, you know, van. And I tell them what happened to me. I was just kidnapped. And their faces were like we're just having coffee. Like it's, you know, like,
early
what?
In the morning.
Yeah, like what is, you know, and they ended up taking me to the hospital. I got a rape kit. I had to spend the night there. And before that, I heavily was influenced by the medical field, whether it was some type of doctor. I wanted to be a surgeon or a psychologist. I wanted to be in the medical field. I've always been very fascinated with the human, like I said. And after that, I just couldn't do it. That experience in the hospital that night, I just knew that I couldn't, there's certain things that I personally, emotionally couldn't take and still go home and live my life like it was normal. Yeah, and that was the story. I pressed charges against him. In the process, there was a detective on the case, and he called me and he said, I really need to talk to you. So when he called me, he said, this guy has raped 3 other women. You know, and I really need you to not be afraid. And I'm just like blown away because I had heard of one story, but me and him weren't together. And I'm like, I don't really care what you did. Whether you did it, you know, I don't, and again, it's like, obviously I wasn't in the right frame of mind and just manipulation. When people can manipulate you and tell you stories and tell you certain things, that gave me the motivation. And I'm like, even if I lose my life for testifying, this man has done this to 3 other people, you know, and he tried to kill me. He really just tried to kill me. So why not? Why would I not press charges? And they did ask me when I went to trial, you know, why didn't you run? And fear is, you know, it takes over you, you know, and it went from,
especially in the moment.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, it went from fear. It originally I was very fearful, to this courage and this bravery of, listen, if I die, I will die with dignity. You know, and because I had lived, well, I'm just going to keep living with dignity, and I'm going to testify against you. I'm going to keep telling the world about you and people like you, because it's not okay. And if I can, so in the moment, this is one of the things I always talk about that I know that I had done. I was sent to a psychologist, and one that signaled to me, okay, you're going to have to work through your healing on this because this is bad. Mm-hmm. Something bad has happened. Don't just sweep it under the carpet and act like it's a regular day and go back to drinking your coffee like normal. You need to work on yourself because this situation can, you know, if you put it under the carpet, it's going to come back up somewhere later in life, you know, and you just want to deal with it. You want to deal with it now. And I knew that.
And you're telling yourself this?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's just so crazy. It's just crazy that I had already kind of thrown myself into the world of psychology as a teenager because my father has bipolar, my mother was a little mentally off. So I've always taken heed to psychology and the way of the mind and the way, you know, so I already knew a little bit about it. And for some reason with this experience, I just knew I had to deal with it now and I had to heal myself. I couldn't go to the psychologist. She like annoyed the mess out of me. Like, how do you feel? I feel really angry that you're just looking at me. Like, you're not even conversing with me. Can we talk through this? You know, just that approach wasn't something that would work for me.
It sounds like you knew how to handle your situation.
Yeah. And I mean,
yourself.
I don't know how, but I did, you know, and I really remember just diving, like literally diving into books. That's all I would do was read self-help books, finding people who had gone through stories like that. I'd always loved Oprah, but at that point I had like hooked myself to her because she had been raped too, you know? So maybe it wasn't my situation, maybe it wasn't what I had gone through, but look at her. Mm-hmm. And she's successful, right?
That's right.
Why would I hinder my life and why would I, you know, feel less than, or, you know, I definitely felt very violated and taken advantage of and all these other things. And I knew I just had to deal with it. And I was living in New York, and then I decided, you know what? God, I'm really going to take this time to get to know you because you've helped me thus far. I prayed very heavily and you gave me what I prayed for. Why would I not search for you? And I lived in New York and I would just talk to homeless people, and I really wanted to figure out the basis of what failure was, what life experiences can do to people, and just talk to different people to see how they had gotten to where they were. And that was a big motivation point for me to just keep going and to, you know, not allow myself to be a victim.
Yeah, I want to commend you because that must have been, you know, really difficult to go through at the time, but it sounds like you found your own personal strength to get through that. Hopefully you've helped other women in the process.
Yeah.
And a lot to go through for a young girl.
Yeah, yeah. And I learned at that moment too that, like, that's not even the worst. That's crazy. Like, that's not even the worst of
the worst that you went through?
Just what life gives anybody. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, there's the quote that says there's always someone going through worse, you know, and if you really could put on someone else's shoes, you would keep your own, you know, and it's, so I say that because not at the time I did know that a little bit because I just, of other things that happen around the world and, you know, in other cultures, and specifically even in the Black community, a lot of communities, there's a lot of incest and family members taking advantage of other family members. And my grandmother had actually revealed to me that it happened to her by a family member. So I thought, well, I'll keep my shoes, you know, and there's always worse. And I really do believe no matter how bad situations are, they're meant to propel you. Only if you let them, though, because it's almost like at first there's anger, you know, that drove me. Like, I cannot believe I put myself here. I cannot believe, you know, I was just in this situation, that I wasn't smarter. Not really beating myself down, but just being just a little upset with the situation, you know, and what ownership could I take over it, opposed to blaming him and how he's such a bad guy. And I knew what I was putting myself into.
And knowing that, you know, probably that I'm better than this, right?
Yes.
I could do better.
Oh, yeah.
I could put myself in a better
Yes.
situation, in a better place.
Yes, yes. And it propelled me. It propelled me so far that I do believe, I'm sure I still would have went somewhat far because I do have a drive from just the way I was raised and my parents and them not really obtaining their dreams or living a life fulfilled. That drives me quite a bit. But it propelled me really, really far because the pain, the hurt, the knowing, you know, you have to channel it somewhere. You can't keep it in you, you know? So that was my way of giving it back to the world.
What advice would you give to young women who may be in a similar situation now and don't know what to do, don't know how to find the personal strength to do what you did? You know, they feel stuck. What advice do you have?
Oh, wow, that's tough. It's tough because, you know, I know at domestic violence there are levels, and I was aware of the wrongness of it probably about a year into our relationship. And I remember the conversation in my head. At first it went from, why is he doing this to me? You know, I'm so this and I'm so that, and I was really nice to him and I was all these great things. And then something kind of changed and was like, well, why are you doing this to you? So when that conversation happens, you know, I think always, I know a lot of women stay out of fear, right? For whatever reason, maybe he's financially provides for you and your children. Or maybe you really do actually fear for your life, and he's very violent. You know, there's women who get their rib cages broken, and you know, I've seen so many stories, and there's actually huge number of women that die every year. My advice would be to, you know, go back to divine. You know, you are not unworthy. You are not. You know your worth. Women know. We always know we're worth more than something. Usually it's the how are we getting out of that situation that we ponder on a little bit too much, opposed to just, you know, jumping and knowing that the wings will be formed on the way down. and just knowing you're better than that. And for me, it was standing up for just generations of women. Like, that's how it literally felt, was me standing up for myself and saying no is the most powerful stance you can ever take on any given situation, to say no. It's such a powerful thing. That's why babies say it. I think they just say it because they love it. When you watch them, do you want to eat? No.
Yeah.
Do you want to do this? No. It's like, and they're totally lying. They could be hungry and like starving, and they'll, no,
Right.
no. Do you want to do this? No. You know, do you love me? No. This is my daughter this morning, you know? It's a powerful stance, and it feels really good. And I think, you know, the more we recognize who we are, we'll take the experience and ones like those, and we'll throw them away, and we'll say, this is just something to add to my toolbox of greatness. And, you know, the courage is making that first step and saying, no, I'm not going to deal with this. And I hope women have the courage to know that there's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of support for situations like that. There's numbers you can call.
That's what I was going to say. You can't be afraid to make that first call. Right.
Right. And that's why I know fear is very debilitating, but it's just, we'll use the acronym, you know, false evidence appearing real. There's nothing real about that situation. And a lot of people who project, you know, now that I know that at this age, you know, that projection of control, and, you know, he was such a macho man, he was a boxer, he had muscles, but he was very insecure. You know, nobody that's secure would ever do something like that, you know, and knowing where his soul must have been, where his heart must have been to do that to me, you know. So these people are really weak, you know, they just shroud it in, you know, slapping you around a little bit, you know. So, you know, it's just false evidence appearing real. The courage you have is really inside. There's no muscle that could ever beat that.
Let's talk about perspective.
Yeah.
That's a big word for you.
It is.
And it has a lot to do with what we're talking about right now, right?
Yeah.
It's all, what perspective do you have on any given situation? But I'd like to know why perspective is so important to you.
I think my awareness of like God before church really imposed anything on me was early on. And I'll tell you that I had found a book. I used to get, my mother used, I'm an avid reader. I think I've been an avid reader since, like, I think I used to just turn pages as like a 2-year-old pretending to read. I would get Peter Cottontail collections in a box for Christmas. And I remember, maybe I was like 8 or 9, and I remember going through the Peter Cottontail books. I didn't read them anymore because I was becoming a big girl. I was almost at double digits. You can't read Peter Cottontail anymore. You have to read like Judy Blume and other things. And I remember coming across a couple pages that said, I hate me. But I didn't feel that way anymore at that time. And I almost had sympathy for my younger self. It was just this weird awareness of where I was, you know? Mm-hmm. That was just really weird for me. You know, having the parents I had, witnessing domestic violence and drug abuse. There was heroin abuse in my home, not from my mom. My dad was in and out of jail my whole life. I was very aware that it was just a situation, that it didn't have to be my life, that I didn't have to say, okay, I'm gonna do what they did, and I'm gonna, you know, spend some time in jail and just get hooked on drugs and live my life month to month. I loathed those things. And then the awareness was even heightened when I would visit, you know, my grandfather. There would be summers, it was just so strange to live poor on public assistance and welfare. And then my grandfather, who sold antiques in Bethlehem, was very wealthy, was very high gambler, to the point where, I mean, we got like Louis Vuitton bags before I even knew like what that was, because that's how much he spent. You know, it doesn't mean anything when you gamble $10,000 away. Of course they'll give you a Louis Vuitton bag. I mean, come on. Right. But being able to see that wealthier side of life, and people who really worked hard, and then to go home and be poor. The perspective was like being chiseled for me. And because I had paid attention to it so much, because I have siblings, but we all didn't learn the same thing. I paid attention to it. I was really into the Christian faith, probably starting around 13, when I just was having a lot of issues with my mom, and we couldn't really get along, and I felt like she was projecting a lot of her anger on me out of all of her children. As the girl, psychologically, it was placed on my heart at a really young age that it was because of what was done to her. So I was the easiest victim because the men around her, you know, her husband was very abusive. You know, my brothers were very disrespectful. Obviously, that was something they had learned. So I was the only one that could be protected. Yeah, I was a super easy target.
Yeah.
But that was like placed on my heart at such a young age that, you know, it helped me to understand her. It helped me to tone down like my resentment and my anger and my just lack of love for my parents. I really went through a phase where I just loathed them. I didn't understand why God would give me those parents. You know, I would go to school and I was always praised and I was always getting awards and I was always doing great things and I always had great grades. But then I would go home and it was like Nightmare on Elm Street, you know? So I think it was just something that was being chiseled out for me to pay attention to. And I know that when you choose the right perspective, things work out. Because there's been a lot of times where I've fallen into the thinking that I grew up with. Because I think the older you get, you realize, oh, I do still have some habits of lack. And I do have habits of feeding into the overwhelm and over-obsessing and getting down on myself and doubting myself and just different things that I had picked up along the way from my parents. And as I got older, they started to seep out of me to where I thought I had a good perspective. Then it was like, oh, you know, you're kind of leaning that way. You should lean a little more this way and figure out how to keep catering to that perspective of, you know, I can be successful and, you know, everything is available to me and I am amazing and my story hasn't made me any less than. So that was something I would say I probably worked through the most once I had children, like fully developing a perspective that was beneficial and not just getting good grades and the accolades, but really feeling it inside and owning it and, you know, just being a sturdy person, whole, you know, feeling whole.
Yeah, and it sounds like you really learned how to channel the different pressures that you had, even at a young age, for the good. You know,
Yeah.
you figured out a way to overcome, so you maintained good grades.
Yeah.
We don't all have warm and fuzzy households. In fact, I would venture to say most people don't.
I agree.
Right? You're in the minority if you do.
Yeah.
So again, I think about young people today. They have a lot of resources available, even more so than when I, you know.
For sure. You have Google. I mean, that's
That's
like,
right. That's right.
that's
So
like God.
yeah, it is. So, but it's having that personal strength to be able to channel that energy and not feel sorry for yourself, right? Because it's very easy to feel sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
Here I am in a household full of boys and my mom, and I'm getting all
Yeah.
the blame for everything, and
Yeah.
why me?
Yeah. I did. That was tough.
How old were you when you started to recognize that, and I want to talk just a little bit about interracial growing up, you know, life. When did you recognize that, okay, I'm a little different here?
Yeah. That was big for me. I was 5.
Okay.
I was 5 and I went to MacArthur in Binghamton and my teacher's name was Miss Hickman. I didn't know it, but she was mixed. She looked more like a black woman and as a 5-year-old, I was unknowing of my difference. I just was, we were who we were. I'm Ebony, that's my brother, that's my mom, that's my dad, you know. It just didn't mean anything to me. And she comes up to me and she says to me, don't ever let anyone call you mulatto. Like, that's a really negative term. Don't ever. And to me, I'm like, science sounds like an ice cream. Like, is that, you know, like, is that
Why is it
candy
so bad?
or a lollipop? Like, that's really interesting. You know, is it a drink? And I'll never forget that. And maybe that, I think, heightened the awareness. It's almost like when you have a car and you're like, oh my God, everyone drives this car. Everyone has already had that car. It heightened your awareness because now you are aware of it, you own it,
Right.
and now you see it everywhere. So after she said that to me, it all of a sudden became apparent that whoa. And this was Binghamton, and I mean, this was like the early 90s. If I was 5, it was like 93, whatever. I hope that math is correct. I started to notice that I didn't have any friends that had mixed parents. I was the only one for a very long time, probably until middle school. I didn't meet like other mixed girls until like middle school, that I was different, and that made me different, and that was like taboo. I started to see it in the negative light that it's portrayed in, like this is a bad thing, to the point where my grandmother, she told me as like, as an adult, she's like, when you would come visit me, you would say white people this and white people that. And she never would correct me, and she would never like talk down to me. She was always really kind to me. I'm sure she would, explain things a little bit more. But that really heightened my awareness of, that like who I am is like taboo. It was really weird. It was really weird to see that, and to know. I was embarrassed, like to know, okay, I'm brown, but my mother's not. Like that's weird. That's really weird. And I couldn't make sense of it. Like for years, I couldn't make sense of it. And growing up out here, like girls who were black would just say really mean things to me. Most of my friends were black, but there was always like, oh, well, your hair this, and just like little comments that girls make, and then from white girls, I felt like I couldn't be accepted because of my hair, because my hair wasn't, sometimes if you're mixed babies come out all kinds of ways. They can be really light but really coarse hair, or really dark with really straight hair. It's just weird, and I didn't fit into a box, and I didn't fit into what everyone else needed to be. However, the blessing that came out of that was, because of all of that resistance, I stopped caring. Like middle school, I was so free-spirited in middle school. I became like the it kid. Me and my brothers, everyone loved my brother, specifically my one older brother, Jeremy. He was like the stud. And
so that kind of paved the way for you, right?
It did, and he just like having older brothers, I posted a picture of them yesterday. Like I can't tell you how awesome that was for me. Like I never wanted a sister. Like all these girls like, oh my God, I wish I had a sister. I mean, I think I do have a sisterhood now that I'm a woman. I've built that, a tribe of really great women, and I have a friend that I've been friends with since we were 5. But I just loved it. Like they're so protective of you, and they just like, he was like a father figure to me because my dad wasn't there. And then he was like the cool kid, and I was the cool kid. And girls wouldn't mess with me because you can't mess with her. Like her brother's way too cute. You can't do that. You gotta stay on his good side, which means being nice to her, And we kind of were like the it kids, and it really boosted my confidence, and it really just gave me that ability to say, what, I don't care what the world thinks. I'm just gonna be who I am. And I have white friends and I have black friends, and like if you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't.
Why is the world so caught up in, why is there racial tension? I don't, it's hard for me to relate to that.
Yeah.
I just don't, I guess it's how you're brought up, right? In the
is.
household, but
It is.
are we ever going to get past this?
We are.
Do you see promise for the future?
Yeah, I totally do. Because I know that, and Oprah said this in her speech, which was at the Golden Globes, for every action there's a reaction. And knowing that, I play that on every level. You have to play that on every level. You can't say, or even when people say, oh my God, God is good all the time, and then something bad happens, and you're like, where are you, God? He's there. It's you have to look at it as your blessing all the time. Trump is a blessing, and although we see the things that we see, I know that it requires a different kind of faith and a different kind of belief in applying these same practices that we all are aware of, which is everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
We have to have the conversation. I knew at 5 it was different. I experienced being followed around a store because of my skin tone. I was arrested as a teenager in the mall for attempt to steal. So I know, I'm aware, and I'm aware that it's been happening for forever. These situations are not new. These feelings are not new. It's like when I stand up and I say, I'm gonna stand up against rape. there's a bunch of other women that say, I'm going to stand up too. That's just how it works. It's like when you're clapping in an auditorium. Nobody wants to be the first one
That's right.
clapping. Nobody wants to be the last
But
one,
then
you know.
everyone joins in.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I purposely sometimes do it because that's just
That's
the way
right.
people are. They need a leader sometimes to just say, that's what Trump gave people. He said, you have the permission to say what you want in not so many words. And I think we need it. I know we need it. I know that there's so many issues from white to black, from black to black, because, in your interview, even with Lisa May, when it's saying, people want to tell you how you need to be as a black person. Okay, well, if you're mixed, you need to talk this way, you need to walk a certain way for me to even accept you. But isn't that a little prejudice in itself?
Right.
You're creating another form of not loving. I feel like unless
Right.
you're loving people, loving them, accepting them, listening to them, hearing them, it's all kind of the same thing. And I think it puts people in that hot seat of, where do you stand? And I don't look at it as in like, are you my advocate? Like, Roger, are you on my side? Like, I'm not on his side. And even when I get invited to things that are super pro-black, I'm very pro-black. I'm pro-people. I'm pro, you pick a side, but let's just meet at peace. Because if we can't have a conversation like this, racial conversations that I see usually don't end up really well.
Right.
People are screaming and
They get
yelling and
heated.
fighting for their right to be heard. And just as someone who's very interested in psychology, I know there's always these very underlying issues of unworthiness and of who am I and unfulfillment that we're just projecting to everything and everyone around us. And I think when you tap into universal knowledge and who we are, I don't know everything, but I know that there's no colorism, and there's no, if I'm talking about my spirit to your spirit, even when you look at different films, we're all glowing in the afterlife. You don't have a skin tone.
That's right.
So, I think it has to happen for us, for a spiritual shift. There's too many people that, might even think about religion. When people really thought in the past, hundreds of years ago, you could pay your way to heaven, and that was tithes. That was the purpose of tithes, was you would pay your way to heaven. There might even be people that go to church every Sunday, but in their hearts, they're not well. They don't think well of others. They don't, but in their minds, maybe they think, I'm paying my dues. When it might just be being kind. I think we've missed that mark on that, but I think we need it. And I think it's great that it's happening. I like to see past the fluff of what everyone else is talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just like fog to me. When everyone's talking about one thing,
Right.
I'm like, I don't want to follow the crowd.
Right, right.
I learned that lesson in middle school. I want to see what opportunities are here and what can we build, from this.
You once said it really kills you when people say they don't have time.
Right.
I agree with you. But talk about that.
Okay. Just being a coach and working with other people, there's a guy that I love. His name is Eric Thomas. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Okay. He's a great guy. He has so many key lessons from his life. He took 12 years to get a bachelor's degree. He was homeless. He didn't have a father. He's African American. And he works, in his speeches, he works you through how he's gotten to where he's at. But he always says, you have to, one of his first speeches was, how bad do you want it? Some people really, you just kind of want it. And I think people think like that. It takes work to be happy. It takes work to be in a decent relationship. It takes work to be a good parent. It takes work to anything you really want. I believe you have to actually work on it. Just like you would work on going a degree, right? And we put all that energy into these different things. We work really hard to get promoted. We work really hard to get nice cars, nice homes. But, sometimes in our own relationships, we won't even give them the light of day. We won't put work into it. When I tell people, you have to meditate every day. If you're not able to calm your mind, you have to learn how to do it, and then eventually it'll become your process. But you haven't developed that in yourself. you know, and they'll say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I forgot, or I didn't have time. And I'm just like, there's 24 hours in a day. You have to be willing to give yourself 2 minutes. You have to be willing to invest in yourself. And I know that even for me, there's been times where I was doing way too much. Way too much. I was doing a lot, but it meant a lot to me. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, you're nuts. Like, if you ever told people, like, the things you juggle at once, you're nuts.
Yeah.
You know, but it really meant a lot to me. And it really means a lot to me to progress and to become a wholesome person and to just be the best that I can be. So I constantly work on it. And, you know, even in just coaching and, you know, doing free discovery calls sometimes with people, I've literally had people tell me that's too much. I don't want to do that. Like, I'm too afraid, and I don't want to invest my time into that.
They have that personal resistance, right?
Right. And I think anything, and even just researching the brain, we're millennials. You have the internet. There's a lot of fluff. You have to learn how to read through the fluff and the false things that are out there. However, there's really great information about the brain and how wonderful it is. And the thought itself of saying I'm not smart really is the root cause of why you can't be smart, because you haven't even bought into I can be smart. Eric Thomas, he wasn't the brightest in the tool shed. It took him 12 years to get a 4-year degree, but he got it, right? And so many other people would say, this is not worth it. I can't do this, and they would give up. And I think that grit and, you know, pushing yourself into the work of certain things, that's how you develop your best self, because you'll never know, right? People say I don't have time, but I know for sure everyone scrolls through Facebook at least for an hour. I've done it where I'm like, oh my God, like, I really just wasted an hour of my life on Facebook, you know, and it's not business related, or Instagram. So I know that when you give anything time, you're investing in the ability for it to grow and to change and to be better.
And really focusing on things that you love, right? Things that make you happy.
Yeah.
So many people are in, whether it's a relationship or a career, that they just don't love. I mean, that's one thing we have in this country, is the freedom to make choice and to spend our time as we wish. So do you want to spend your time watching television? Do you want to spend your time learning? Do you want to spend your time figuring out how to get out of a bad situation so you could put yourself in a good situation? And I know it's easier said than done, but it starts with the mindset.
Yeah.
And the awareness and the perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Eric Thomas, you have to check him out. And he always says, you know, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Right. Right.
It's not going to be easy. Like, just get over it, and you have to do it.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Nothing's easy if you see gain. No pain, no gain.
Yeah.
Let's talk about signs. Do you believe in signs?
Totally.
Are they out there every day?
100%, yeah, for sure. The fruition of that just theory in itself really took flight in that situation that I described to you, where he called me and he said, you need to come get your stuff. And I'm waiting for the train that I'm supposed to be on going this way. And no. I'm waiting for the train going this way, which was to him. I was on Eastern Parkway, and I was supposed to be going on this train going that way. My number has always been 3. I'm the 3rd child. I'm 3 days after Christmas, 3 days before the New Year, which are big holidays. I always live on the 3rd floor. You know, I have a presentation coming up. I'm the 3rd speaker. Just all these different things. Today's 113. You know, just different things. I have 3 kids, 3 girls, 3. So the train that I was supposed to be on passed me 3 times. It was abnormal for that day of the week. It wasn't, you know, on the weekend, sometimes that happens because the express is going by. It wasn't that type of day. While it's happening, something in me is literally nudging me. You need to go over there. You need to get on that train. That's all I could. You need to get on that train. Every time it would pass, you need to get on that train. And sometimes, I think even the last train, you know, sometimes people are still boarding and it kind of sits there for just a touch longer.
Yes.
It was kind of one of those things.
And the doors were open, and you're, come on,
right,
get on the train.
Right, yeah.
Right.
And I didn't listen. And that was the first lesson I had about intuition and about following the signs, because they're presented to you always, only if you're willing to see them. You know, I think we're so blinded that sometimes you don't even notice. I saw something, they were talking about a study where there were some kids on their phone and they didn't even notice that a clown on a unicycle had passed them.
Right.
That's crazy.
Right.
So I know that they're readily available. And that pretty much sparked, my belief in signs and really looking for them. Sometimes I look too deeply into them. It could be like the stupidest thing and I'm like, oh, that was a sign. No, that was just a bird pooping on your car. Relax,
Right.
So I know that they're readily available to us, and and for me, it comes in different ways. It might be feathers. I find a lot of coins, which is known if you look up angels, like the different things they leave. I actually did see a spirit guide, a medium, and she told me I have 3 angels.
Tell us about that.
Oh my gosh, that was crazy. First of all, everyone around me was like really upset with me. She was filming a show for TLC and they said, we need pretty people on the show and not so many words. Would you mind coming on? We need like good looking people to make the show look good. And I'm like, I don't even care about the show. Like, just tell me my future.
Right.
Which is not what she does. She sees spirits and angels and things like that. She's a medium. And I'm like, sure, I'm there. And I pull up and the crew, because it's a show, they want to make sure she's not phony. So they're asking me questions. Why are you here? Give us an experience you've been through, just random piece together questions. No biggie. So she comes and lavender apparently is a scent that invokes angels and
I've heard
spirits,
that, yeah.
right? And I don't know that. I love lavender. So there's all these things that I'm doing anyways that are just, I'm like, oh, well, I've been invoking these things for years. So she sits down and she goes, you were born feeling very lonely, which was true. I was born in a room by myself. No one was there, no one, just me and my mom. She gave birth to me and nobody was there to say hi. I obviously don't have memories of that, but I know that's a fact. And she says, you were immediately set 2 angels when you were born, which is like, psh, really? Like, that's cool. And she goes, they want me to tell you, they told you to run.
Wow.
And the whole crew is like,
Gives me chills.
yeah. And I'm like, I was trying so hard not to cry because I'm like, that's crazy. Because as loud, as if someone was right here in my ear, run. Like you were talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way I couldn't have listened to that. So let me just backtrack a little bit to an experience I had in New York. At this point, I lived like a gypsy all over New York because I didn't have a lot of money and it was like,
Whatever couch you could find. Or
whatever apartment.
Sure.
People just do crazy things. Oh, by the way, our lease is ending like next week, so you have to. You're like,
right.
Really? So at that time I lived on 126 between 5th and Lenox. And living in New York, one of the things I hated the most was getting like catcalled all day and guys just whistling at you. It was just like, can I just live in peace? I just wanted to live in peace. So I'm in the train station getting my Metro card or whatever from the kiosk, and there's a guy right here in my ear, and he goes, you're beautiful. And I'm like, I kind of turned around with like the death look, like,
Again.
What do you need? Like, what do you need? What do you want? Hi, So he steps back and he goes, you're not beautiful. I'm not talking about your exterior. I'm talking about your heart and who you are. And I'm like, okay, like this is creepy, but okay. I've always been open to, all right, let's see what's going on. I know God's influence in my life. So I'm like, okay, let's play this out. So he's like telling me all these scriptures and he was talking and I couldn't hear him because there were like trains going by. He goes, how about you meet me at this church? It's on 126th. It was like a block up in Lexington, I believe it was. And I'm like, well, that's kind of crazy because I live over there. Like I live like 2 blocks away from that church. I walk past it all the time. I didn't even know, like I wouldn't have batted an eye to go in. I go to the church and I don't tell many people this story. So I go to the church and everybody knows him. I can't remember his name, but like I always think Michael for some reason. I feel like his name was Michael. everybody knows this man. Hey, how you doing? Hey, whatever, you know, he sits in the front because he's somebody. Okay, this is cool. And I remember there was one choir that came up that sang like, it was just so beautiful. And I love just art and music, and it really does something for our souls. And the second choir was rehabilitated addicts who were they were in their late 40s. And as a teen, for me, to see them display that level of craft. And I mean, like, the singing was like your hairs on your body. It was just so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And I was like, wow, like, we all have greatness within us. It was just a big lesson that I learned that day. So I loved it. I was kind of digging it. There was people from all over the world. It was a really mixed church. And it really wasn't like a service. It was more of a communion. As in, like, we're just coming in to commune. You're going to hear singers. There wasn't like a pastor or anything. So I go back the next Wednesday. It was every Wednesday. And I'm looking for him. Nobody knows him. I'm like, I've got to be crazy. I cannot tell people this story. Like, this is crazy. And I swear everybody knew him. He wasn't in the church. I'd never seen him I'd never seen him after that. And I had gone maybe 2 other times after that. I was a little creeped out because I'm like, what just happened? And something in me was kind of like, you met an angel. So let's go back to the medium. She goes, well, the third one was sent to you a little while after you lived in New York. And this was maybe within a year after that situation. She goes, the third one was sent to you after once you lived in New York. And I just was like,
that's incredible.
No freaking way. I already knew it had to be him.
Yeah.
It had to be him. And talk about divine intervention, and there was just so many lessons of, okay, you really need to tune into whatever you've got going on, because you have a voice and you have something in you that needs to come out. And I felt like it's like God nudging me. Like, that's just the craziest thing, that you can't tell people that. You can't say, yeah, I kind of met an angel one day and he disappeared and he took, you're like, people are like,
come on,
she needs some meds. Like, what is it, Zoloft? I don't know what people take, like Valium, like the highest prescribed, medication. And it was just an amazing experience to, have her talk to them, and they're talking to her to tell me things that only they knew, like no one else would know. And it really just confirmed, like, listening to signs. My number 3, just paying attention to it. Pay attention. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just a good lesson to pay attention in general. Like you said, the kids that are in their phone, they don't see the clown. We're so, enthralled with these phones today.
Yeah.
And it's a big problem.
It is.
And my kids are getting to the age now, 11 and 15, where, it consumes them.
It does.
And unless you put rules in place, and that's what the companies want. They want to control the mind.
Yeah.
But we have to step in and make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I saw an interview with, I can't think of the guy's name. I have it saved on my YouTube downloads because it was just so phenomenal. But he talks about, like, getting email notifications all day, and we all want to be connected. That's number 1.
Yes.
We all want to be connected, and this has given us that ability to never feel alone. You could be the most lonely person in the world, but if you have a phone, you're not alone, right?
Right.
Someone else is up when you're up, or tweeting, or Facebooking, or you can read their status, or maybe you can just even live their life through them, through social media. But he was saying that, the effect of phones is almost equivalent to, like, how we cope with cigarettes or alcohol. He brought up alcohol, and it's almost equivalent to telling your child, if things get a little rocky, if life gets a little rough, just take a swig, swig or 2.
Right.
And there's no, we don't have barriers on how often people really should be consuming it, because it's too much. And when you talk about escapism and people not, owning up to their problems and looking themselves in the mirror. I mean, Michael Jackson sung about it. There's so many things out there that are telling us it's not in the world. And I think because technology is so cool, I have even found myself in the past where you're online, you don't even know why you're online. Like you're scrolling, you don't even know why you're scrolling. Mm-hmm. You're refreshing your page, there's nothing to refresh.
Yeah.
Like what am I looking for? Nobody thinks about that. When you refresh that, it's such a weird thing. Why are you refreshing it? It's like no one's like, well, why? Like what else is gonna come up that you're gonna see? Like,
it's that instant, like there's a need for that instant, gratification or new set of news or whatever it may be at that moment.
Yeah.
That may not even be there.
Yeah, and we just haven't controlled how often we need it, or do we need it? Talking face to face, looking people in their eyes, and communication. I think it's hindered our communication, if anything.
Right. How important is self-love?
I talk about self-love all the time, and I call it a self-love meter, which is like your odometer of, how much do you love yourself? So when I experienced that situation of being held hostage and raped, what was apparent was, okay, not that I didn't love myself, but if you loved yourself a little bit more, would you allow that? Right? Would you put yourself in that situation? Would you put yourself in that situation? And it really led me down a journey of exploring what that meant. When I was in high school, I had to read as an assignment 100 Years of Solitude. Mm-hmm. That book, for some reason, had given me confirmation that it's okay to be alone. It was the strangest book. I'll never understand it. I feel like the way that it was written was like, oh, now we're over here. It was just a very interesting book, the way it was written. I still can't piece it together. But what I did get from it was being alone is okay. Yeah. It's okay. So I've always tuned into that, not knowing that's a skill. Yeah. Like to be okay with being alone is a skill. And it makes a lot of people really uncomfortable. I've had people straight out tell me, as much as I should be alone, I kind of get a little antsy. And I'll start, the guy talks about this too. You text 10 friends, hi, 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 hi. You need that connection, opposed to halting it and saying, you know what, I need to know what I like, what I love, what I won't tolerate. And I believe and I know that once you've developed that space, unless you can match it, you can't be in my space. Unless you're at that same level of matching what I give myself, right? It's kind of like the saying where it says, I can do bad all by myself. I'm okay with being lonely, and I believe in my most loneliest places, I've heard God. And that's the space so why would I not want to be in that space all the time? I want to listen, I want to hear, I want to be in the same space and alignment.
And there's a skill to that, and I think today more than ever, because like we talked about earlier, the kids growing up now, it's even more intense than when we grew up.
Yeah.
So how do we teach them to be alone? How do we teach them that it's okay, that's where you get your own personal strength, is within your own heart and your own mind, and being able to reflect?
It's interesting because I volunteer at the high school and I've seen girls change over time, and I think I'm still developing how to communicate with like teenagers. I'm just myself. I know that a lot of other people couldn't say I'm always 100% myself. If you're a teacher, you play a role, right? People literally play roles. Okay, I'm a principal, so I should act like this. We all think like that. I'm a director, I should sit like this. I should do this at a meeting. I shouldn't respond to emails this kind of way. I need to respond as a director and not a staff member. It's just, we all play roles. And I think, teaching them it's okay to be alone. I think the more important thing is like teaching them who they are, because the influence of everything else around them is telling them what they're not. I like that. That's the biggest thing to me, even for my kids, where they'll fight with each other and they'll say, well, my middle might say, well, they don't like me, or someone said they don't like me. And I'm like, psh, so what? I don't know what other response to give her because that's the one that I know is going to get her through. Because if I say, well, honey, how did that make you feel? And no, like, do you like yourself?
That's what's important.
That's what's important. And because that's what worked for me.
Right.
I had to develop that, well, I really like myself. So it doesn't matter if you don't like me. I don't need to always feel connected. And honestly, sometimes when I'm on social media too much, I feel frantic. I feel like, okay, I have to lately I've been turning my phone on airplane mode. But I think it's really giving them that ability of who am I from the jump and investing in that with them and giving them nature and giving them different experiences and introducing them to other cultures and telling them about other religions, not just the one you choose, and giving them the free reign to explore.
You seem to want to make an impact with everything you do. That's what I've noticed with you. I'm curious, do you feel the same about yourself? Do I have that right? Are you trying to make an impact purposely? I mean, I know this is you. You've come into your own.
I am.
It's taken some time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it seems to me like you're feeling like you're at a pretty good place.
I am.
Right now.
I am. And in that search for myself, this is one of the things I'll never forget. You know, when we talk about numbers, I really had looked into numerology very young, which was kind of taboo because it's like, oh, that's witchcraft. And it's like, but we're all given numbers. You're given math, you're given writing, you're giving all these great tools, but never given the ability to apply them in a way that actually makes sense to you, right? The stars. Oh yeah, those are great, they're up in the sky, but they influence a lot of things. There's planets, there's all these different things. So I really dove into numerology, and my master number was 11.
Wow.
Right? Is that yours?
It's one of them, yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
And in it, it said that, this like shook me to the core. I probably was like 20 and I was like, I don't think I want to do that. But it said Martin Luther King was a number 11. And it said either you will step up into your greatness or you will shrink back. But you know, like, you'll have an impact on whatever you do, but you're called for this.
Right.
And I just was like, I don't think I want to do that. So then remembering that, I decided, okay, I'm going to play this out. And I'm just going to do what I know I should be doing. And I know that I'm very well thought out before I say things most of the time. I'm kind of goofy. I like to have fun too. And in being that way, I've noticed the ability to have an impact with my words because I think about them, I think through them, I put myself in other people's shoes. Like I'm playing it out in my mind to make sense of certain things. So before I speak, you know, I've already like created this whole
formulated.
Yeah. And I noticed that, so I try to make it useful and impactful. Yeah.
What advice do you have? I know you talked about being working at the high school, which is wonderful. What advice do you have for Generation Z that's up and coming? You see it firsthand, so what do you have to say?
I mean, the biggest thing that I teach them would be, it really is self-love. There's a quote that I learned in high school. I don't even know, I think it was a psychology class that I had taken. And it was question everything you've been told, dismiss what insults your soul. I live by that. Like that quote, the minute I read it, I clung to it because internally we always know when you really tune into your voice and saying, okay, I think even when you don't tune into it that much, you know a little bit when you should go a certain way or do a certain thing, you know, or if your friends are going out and you don't really want to go, you know, we have to really tune into that and be affirmative in who we are and say, you know what, you guys go ahead. I'm not going to go. And you'll experience things from that stance where you say, you know what, I'm happy I didn't go because they all got drunk and they got into a car crash. Whoa, but what if I was there? So I had experienced that so many times because I had set that barrier of, I'm not going to do what's cool. That's the biggest thing, you know, with kids that are younger. Stop doing what's cool, like trends. That's like the biggest thing, trendy. You want to be trendy. Everybody wants to be a celebrity. Everybody wants to be known, but for what? You know, we have to think past the here and now. We have to think past Yeah, definitely the here and now, and really focus on, like, what do I like? Who am I? What do I want to be? And definitely it's okay to be alone. It's okay to, you should probably invest in spending a lot of time by yourself so you can get to know what you like, and then just gravitate towards everything on that wavelength. It's probably the best I could put it.
What's next for Ebony Tutora?
What's next? Oh my gosh. I aspire to speak to millions of people. Like, I just see myself. You know, I definitely do it now. I will be speaking in Elmira to, I think it's like close to 1,000 people coming up in March.
Fantastic.
I'll be teaching, thank you, at BCC. But I don't want to be on an international stage. I'm not someone who's seeking limelight, because I actually prefer to be like the producer rather than the one in the chair, although I do love it. You know, I'm not going to say I don't love it. I do love it too. However, personally, I would prefer to create and be behind the scenes than to be in the forefront of it, which is something I've had to grow through in having a number 11. But I know that the future just has a grand stage for me to just keep helping people evolve and keep helping people tap into the pineal gland, you know, your third eye, and to live outside the box that seems so uncomfortable to step out of. You know, I always tell people there's a lot of limiting beliefs that we don't know we believe and that we have subscribed to, right? Educational beliefs. Now we're all seeing those things crumble, and it's a little confusing, right? Nobody, you know, schools are trying to figure out, how do we retain kids? They don't want to go to college anymore. They've watched their parents go to debt. Oh, you're a doctor and you owe how much?
Right.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to go play my banjo on 42nd Street and
be
live
happy.
my life and be happy. Exactly. They're aware of this. And it's very confusing, and it's, you know, everyone's trying to figure out, how do we market to these, you know, Generation Zs? How do we get them to keep, you know, buying and feeding into what we're feeding them? It's just not going to work, because they're really aware. They're very
They are
smart.
very
they're
aware.
super. I mean,
Very
the
smart.
things my 4-year-old says, I'm like, whoa, like, you
Yeah.
are aware.
Yeah.
Aware. And there's really no way around that. And they really are the change. And I think we just have to keep cultivating them. But I definitely see myself as, I look at people like this, like a flower. You know, when it's just like, there's some flowers that, you've bought flowers,
Sure.
where you've had to cater to them. I buy them and they always die. But when they do live, sometimes there's like that one that just won't open, right? And I feel like that's how we are. And I feel like I'm just that little person that's like sprinkling fairy dust on people. And when I give, you know, just working with them, they bloom and they just become other people. And I don't take credit for it, because I think in being a coach, I don't want to become pompous, like I get results. You know,
You just want to see the best come out in them.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that the people that come to me, they're ready, but I always see them, they're always like this, and they have the tools and they have everything that they need, but through our conversation, it just ignites something, and then there they go. You know, and then they start changing the world, and then they start changing their life, and they start changing their surroundings.
It's infectious.
And it is. So back to your original question where you said, do you see that world? Absolutely. Because as a change agent, if that's what I want to call myself, I can see that ripple effect. You know, I don't have a big stage, but what I've done just for within the community and other events that people have been inspired to do or inspired to be, that's what it's about, you know. And not to sit on a throne, which I am a queen. However, you know, that's the point of life. It's just keep that domino effect going. So that, you know, I do think I'll be very old when it happens. I think I'll be really old. I think God's probably going to allow me to live into my late 90s, which is, that's okay. I'll take it, because being able to see that will be great. But I know that it exists, and I know that it exists through that, you know, and you can't change everybody, and I've already let that go. And I'm just willing to assist the people that want to be assisted, and there's a lot of people
Yeah, for sure.
that want it and need it, so
Great.
that's what I see.
So if you could go back and give some advice to your 20-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Yeah. Excuse me. You know what? I would give, like last year, Ebony some advice too, because I was thinking about this actually the other day. But as a 20-year-old, that's tough because I felt like that was a decent spiritual space. I think one thing that I default on, which I had not so much anymore, was everything that glitters isn't gold. And you know, there was this story of manipulation playing out on different fronts of my life. I would say trust yourself. That's what I would have said to myself. Trust yourself.
Trust your gut.
Right, trust your gut. And not that I hadn't already learned that lesson, but I think it repeats to say, so are you going to trust it now? Okay, so are you going to trust it now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, are you going to, you know, and people take those situations and they're like, why is this happening to me? For me, I'm like, whoa, you need to work on something. But I would say trust yourself. And truly, there are no limits. I already knew that, but I think if I had embraced it a bit more, I would have done things a lot differently. Yeah.
So again, you're a millennial. You're still very young, but there's one last question I have for you, and that's: do you think about leaving a legacy? Is that important to you? And if so, what do you want it to be?
That's huge. That's so huge for me because luckily I have relatives, and my grandmother, she created this book of my grandfather's history as well as my her side. So being able to read that depth of where you come from for hundreds of years, you know, like there's like a legend that maybe we're related to Pocahontas and all these different weird things that are so cool, of my great uncle being a mayor. Like knowing this propels me to move even further because it's like, well, this is already in you. You've already got this running through your bloodline. You just have to activate it. So when I think about my legacy, I mean, honestly, I really just want to inspire millions. I want my kids to be proud of me. I want my grandkids to be proud of me. I want their kids to be proud of me and to go a lot further than wherever I'll go. My daughter always says to me, my oldest, she doesn't say it much anymore because I've corrected her too many times. She always goes, Mommy, I want to be just like you. You're so great. I just want to be just like you. And I go, honey, no matter how great I am, I need you to be better. Like, I really need you to be better. And I know she's not going to understand it now, but I've said it enough, and I'll keep saying it until I'm like in with my cane, which hopefully I don't want to. I'm not going to claim a wheelchair because I want to be 96 and still pushing it and walking. But I want to leave a legacy of living up to your fullest potential with no holds bar, like absolutely no holds bar. And I'm still working through that. I think the older we get, you become more fearless. But that's the legacy I want to leave. And I'm a big fan of speaking your truth. And Oprah said it. I mean, she couldn't even have said it better. But speaking your truth, whatever it may be. Like, I really love purple. Or I really love cats. Or people are so ashamed of what they love and their quirks and their weirdness. And, you know, like when you can just speak it and be yourself and not care, you know, that's freedom. Like, there's no better freedom than that. So that's the legacy I'd love to leave.
Wonderful. Well, Ebony Tutora, you are amazing. You're inspiring, and you're inspiring thousands today, and I know millions tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And we'll do it again.
Yes. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.